Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this high-level debate that we will be having in the upcoming 90 minutes. I'm happy to see the faces of our experts and panelists joining us already. Just to clarify from the beginning, some of us will be here at GoToMeeting, but at the same time, this meeting is being streamed on both YouTube and Facebook. And of course, it is co-organized by the Association for International Affairs and the representation of the Free State of Bavaria to the Czech Republic. And I would kindly ask if we may start this session with a video salutation that were kindly provided by the ministers of both entities that are in the debate here. And first we will have the salutation from Mr. Tomáš Petříček, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to address this forum alongside my distinguished colleague and friend, the Bavarian Minister for European Affairs, Florian Herman. The Czech-Bavarian relations are excellent and intensive, characterized by mutual understanding and the ability to communicate well on all common issues. Our cooperation during this difficult period of the pandemic clearly proves that. On the European Green Deal, the Czech Republic supports the fulfillment of the EU's commitments in climate protection in order to meet the objectives of the Paris Climate Convention. The goal of climate neutrality by 2050 is of high importance, and it should be set out at the EU level rather than member states. Climate neutrality, as conceived in the Green Deal, is a comprehensive issue that requires close cooperation among all member states. As the President of the European Commission said in her State of the Union speech, the pandemic brought the planetary fragility into sharper focus and the need to do things better, faster, in a responsible and evidence-based way. It is important to keep promoting climate action and reiterating political commitment at global level. In this context, a strong leadership of the EU in climate action is more important than ever. Czechia also considers beneficial that the EU wants to strengthen existing initiatives and cooperate with third countries on cross-cutting climate and environmental issues. A green transformation has the potential to transform geopolitics, including global economic, trade, and security interests. We need to see the opportunities this transformation can bring, especially in our cooperation in technology development and innovation. New technologies and smart solutions could deliver huge energy savings and greenhouse gas reduction. Innovative approaches could help us adapt to climate change and mitigate the fallout from it. Climate protection, especially export of best practices and capacity building, should therefore become a permanent part of EU external action and cooperation in neighborhood policy, development cooperation, and humanitarian aid. At a time when we all try to explore ways to economic recovery, one thing is clear. Our own plans must be in line with the objectives set out in the Green Deal. The vast majority of member states identified the European Green Deal as an essential tool for renewal. In addition, the transition must be fair and socially balanced for all regions and groups of citizens, as some of them will be more affected than others. Together, we should look for solutions that will enable us to meet high environmental ambitions, while at the same time supporting the economy, investment, and job creation. I wish much success for your meeting.
Very much for those kind words that were presented by Mr. Tomáš Petříček, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. And now I would kindly ask for the other salutation, which is from Dr. Florian Herman, the Bavarian State Minister and Minister of State for Federal and European Affairs and the Media.
Dear Minister of Foreign Affairs Petříček, dear Tomáš, dear members of the panel, dear friends from Czechia and Bavaria. The Bavarian representation in Prague is known for bringing people together to debate about Europe and the challenges ahead of us. I'm happy to see that the representation in Prague has found creative digital ways to keep our line of dialogue open for all matters of common interest. Climate change, its causes and effects are at the heart of politics worldwide. In Europe, we have a strong consensus among the member states that we want to make Europe a climate-neutral continent by 2050. Unlike others, we do not deny the causes and effects of climate change. And we also recognize that the transformation from a fossil fuel-driven economy to a carbon-neutral society is necessary. We need to find a way to achieve these goals and at the same time create jobs and new economy wealth with clean energy and new smart solutions for mobility. Citizens need to be on board and understand, approve and drive the measures. We also know that we start from very different positions in Europe. Energy production and consumption are as diverse as industrial structures and fiscal possibilities. As industrial leaders and agricultural regions, Bavaria and the Czech Republic have very similar interests and predispositions. Bavaria is advancing climate protection very strongly. With our Bavarian climate offensive, we will invest up to 700 million euros to make our forests, our agriculture and economy ready for climate change. We are working on a Bavarian law for environmental protection. The goals are clear. Until the year 2030, we want to reduce emissions by 55%. We want to be the first climate-neutral federal state of Germany until 2050 or earlier. Everyone has to contribute in Europe. We support a strong financial commitment to the European Union in order to facilitate the task for everyone. The President of the Commission has opened the debate in her State of the Union speech on September 16. We are looking forward to see the legislative proposals by the Commission, how our ambitious goals can be achieved in a realistic way. If Europe acts together, we will have the weight we need to convince others around the globe. Dear friends, debates like tonight help us to see things clearer so that we can take the right steps. I'm very much looking forward to this panel and the impulses from this evening.
Much for those kind words presented by Mr. Florian Herrmann. And now let me give some organizational and practical information as well as the framing of today's debate, which I believe will be an asset to the common discussion in Czech Republic and Bavaria on potential pathways for collaboration in light of the current political changes when it comes to the environmental and climate agenda, but specifically affected, of course, by the current ongoing COVID pandemic. I welcome everybody who was able to join in and also second the words of Mr. Herrmann that it is indeed fortunate that we were able to move this event into a digital platform, even though we were not able to meet in person, unfortunately, but still, as it seems, we will be fully capable of having a very lively and interactive discussion even on this platform. People who are joining here on GoToMeeting, they have the opportunity to raise their hands and ask questions or give remarks directly later in the discussion, while at the same time we have people who are following us on Facebook or YouTube. So there they might still try to ask some questions in the chat, and I will try to pick them up and translate them and bring them up in the discussion later. But the more interactive format will be taking place on this GoToMeeting platform. Let me very kindly ask everybody present to keep your microphones muted at all time when you are not speaking. Otherwise, we might have some problem with the sound and interference in the audio. So that is quite important. And yeah, I think for the technical issues and technical matters, that should be it for the moment. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Tomáš Jungwirth, and I work as the head of climate team at the Association for International Affairs, which is a Prague-based independent think tank. And I will be moderating the debate today. And of course, I would like to welcome our respected and very much cherished panelists, of whom we have 4, 2 from the Czech side and 2 from the Bavarian side. So let me start with introducing Anna Karníková, who is the director of Hnutí Duha, Friends of the Earth, Czech Republic. Anna, can you just wave so that everybody gets note? Great, thank you very much. Then we have Miranda Schojes, who is the chair of Energy and Environmental Policy at the Technical University of Munich. Welcome, Ms. Schojes. To follow up, we are joined by Mr. Petr Kalaš, who is the chief advisor of the minister at the Ministry of Environment of the Czech Republic and former minister himself. Welcome, Mr. Kalaš. And of course, last but not least, we have a representative of the private sector, who is Michal Horsch, who is the CEO of Horsch Maschinen, a company based in Bavaria. Welcome. So the debate will be mostly taking place among and between those 4 panelists. But as I was saying, you all participants are welcome to ask questions and give remarks at a later stage. I particularly would like to note that we are joined by a set of young experts and professionals who are taking part within the Czech-German Young Professional Program that is happening right now, partly in place in Prague, partly online. And we would be more than happy to pick your brains and get some of your insights and questions later on in the debate on this platform at GoToMeeting. So, as conceived, we would like to ask each of the panelists to give a 5-minute introduction, some remarks on the topic in question, which of course is the European Green Deal, Bavarian and Czech perspectives in the light of Corona. And what we want to look at is how is the European agenda in terms of the climate policies and politics impacted by the current ongoing pandemic. What do you think are the pathways and trajectories that you see for going forward on this territory? And also, of course, what do Czech Republic and Bavaria respectively think of the current situation? How do they perceive it? And then in particular, we would be very interested to hear any of your thought on potential ways of cooperation between both Bavaria and the Czech Republic in the climate agenda and in the European Green Deal agenda. I think that's quite fundamental. And if we can get something more tangible, more practical out of this discussion, that would, of course, be a great asset. As I already mentioned, we have in the panelists, we have representatives from the academia, from the NGO sector, from the public sector, as well as the private sector. So the breadth of opinions and expertise should be quite remarkable, and hopefully it will also enrich the debate. So let me first start by inviting our panelists for their introductory remarks, and then we will move later on to the interactive discussion while you all are invited to take part. I would first like to ask Ms. Schojes to join us here and give her initial input. You have the floor, please.
Yes, thanks very much. Would it be possible to have the screen share activated?
Yes, let me try to make you a presenter so that you would be able to do that. If you now try to click on the screen button down, you should be able to share your screen.
Let's see. Oh dear, it doesn't seem to want to let me. Let's see. So we'll do it without the presentation. I'm sorry about that. So my name is Miranda Schroers, and I am at the Technical University of Munich. And I am really quite excited about this opportunity to speak with both young people from Germany and the Czech Republic about the Green New Deal. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the content of the Green New Deal, but it's a very exciting development because it's really changing the narrative of economic development. So the narrative until now has been that economic growth is extremely important, but that environment is often a costly problem that slows down economic growth. And so there's always been this push towards cheap energy, cheap materials, and consumption has been a very important part of how we've looked at economic development. And I think what's changing now is public awareness of just how serious the problems we are causing for the planet are. We see climate change. You've seen the horrible forest fires in Siberia in the United States right now. We had this here in Europe not so long ago when huge sections of Greece and Spain were burning. We're seeing it in the form of biodiversity loss or the plastics in the ocean. And I think what we're really recognizing now is that we're close to a tipping point. We need to change how we're developing and the economic approach to development. And this is where the Green Deal comes in as a very exciting new kind of discourse. It's a discourse that links environmental protection and climate protection to economic development. And it changes how we think about economic development. So the focus is no longer on economy versus environment. It's really thinking about how do we integrate economy and environment. And this is tied to some very, very impressive goals, also very challenging goals. Climate neutrality by 2050. Turning our economic system from one that develops products and then throws them away to developing a circular economy, even in areas like in steel making, to think about how can we develop production processes in very heavy industries in such a way that they are part of a circular economy. We're seeing the push to renovate buildings, to make them much, much more energy efficient than they are, to reduce pollution dramatically in air, water, and soil, so also in terms of agriculture, and to link these efforts much more strongly to thinking about how to protect biodiversity. And for Europe, but also very much for Germany and the Czech Republic, this is going to mean some very big and important changes. In both countries, the automobile industry is very important. Both Germany and the Czech Republic are producers of automobiles, but they've been producing what we might call old-style automobiles. And we now need to be thinking about how to produce a new kind of transport that is climate neutral. So what we're seeing with the Green Deal is an initiative to really change how we've been thinking about environmental protection and economic growth. For Germany, this is an interesting double challenge because Germany has not only chosen to tackle the climate change issue, it's also tackling nuclear. So Germany has a plan to phase out nuclear by the end of 2022. And on top of this, has now added a goal of phasing out coal by 2038. So the phase out of coal and nuclear means that in a relatively short period of time, a complete system change on the energy front is necessary. But this is also what is required by the Green Deal, climate neutrality by 2050. And this is the goal that Germany has set for itself as well, climate neutrality, greenhouse gas neutrality by 2050. With a target of a 55% reduction by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Now, interestingly, environmentalists argue this is still not enough. We need to go further and faster and harder. So we are seeing policy changes. Germany has plans for a climate action law, and we have just heard about the Bavarian plans for an environmental protection law and the idea of achieving climate neutrality by mid-century. What we know is that we don't have a lot of time left if we want to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions at a level that will not go above a 1.5 degrees centigrade increase. The 2-degree target is also extremely difficult. For you young people, this might sound kind of scary. It means really, really big changes need to happen. But at the same time, it also means there are lots of tremendous opportunities. And that's actually something which I hope we can come back to in the discussion. What kind of opportunities do we have to deal with the problem and push forward on the Green Deal that will maybe allow your generation to do much better than my generation or the previous generations have done with economic growth, by linking economic growth and environmental protection much more closely. So what are those areas? I'll just make this short and then turn over the floor to the next speaker. I think we have a lot of potential in what we're doing right now. The digital world, we have seen huge developments in a very short time here. I think it will reduce some of the international business and conference traveling. So I think this is a real a lesson we've had from the COVID experience. I think what we're going to see is a transition in universities and how they go about teaching, because there's going to be a much stronger focus now on problem solving in engineering arenas, dealing with climate change, but also with the social arenas, thinking about how do we make greener cities, how do we make more livable cities. And I think what we're also going to see is big efforts and pushes to think comprehensively when we're planning for the future, because we need to see how things are integrating with each other. But that also means we can think in new ways about how do we develop the cities of the future? How do we develop the transport systems of the future? So I look forward very much to the dialogue here. I think it'll be a great chance to think of some ways we can work together on moving forward on the Green Deal.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schroers. I think this was very essential for an input and really kind of lays out the scene for the debate that we will be having. And of course that we won't be having just here today, but that will be going on for years and decades in some ways. And also thank you for bringing out the key issues about how do we actually make the society and economy work vis-a-vis the necessary transformation that has to happen in our environmental agenda. Just a piece of technical advice for everybody: if you prefer to see the speaker who is talking rather than everybody who is present on the call, just click in the upper center to view everyone and change it to view who's talking. That might be helpful for you also to get a better insight into the presenter. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Kalash, who is, of course, very well acquainted with both the European and the Czech agenda, being a chief advisor to the Ministry of Environment of the Czech Republic, if he would kindly follow up on Ms. Schroer's remarks.
Very much, Mr. Jukwert. Good afternoon to everybody. My first point goes to thanks to the Bavarian representation in Prague for the invitation to attend this event. I like also to welcome the participants from the Czech-German young professional group. I think it is very important, as Ms. Schroer already mentioned, to involve young generation in the future growth agenda. I have a personal thanks to Mr. Lachman and also to the team of Jana Hrda and Jaroslav Bach for the technical guidance and preparation of this meeting. Due to coronavirus, of course, we are forced to meet online. Maybe next opportunity would be to meet also personally. This event is one of the many events organized by the Bavarian representation. And as Green Deal is our common agenda, it's really the opportunity, and I like to stress this, to discuss from Czech Republic and Bavarian perspective, possibility of our cooperation. My first remarks goes generally to the EU perspective on the Green Deal. It was mentioned by our minister, the Green Deal launches a new growth strategy for the European Union. And goals of the EU Green Deal is to transform European Union to just and prosperous society with modern and competitive economy that will make effective use of resources with zero carbon emissions by 2050 and with decoupling of the growth from the resource utilization. It's a great agenda. The Green Deal is designed to underpin and accelerate this transition at the European and also at member states level. I'd like to mention the architecture of the Green Deal because it consists of important two top-down and bottom-up processes. Creates exactly the intersection at the national investment, sustainable investment projects. And this is where at the national and also at the regional and maybe local levels, the initiative on the transition could start to be implemented. So from the top down, the European Union set the policy goals, policy toolkit, how to implement the policies, implementation strategy, and brought together financial mechanisms like the Modernization Fund, Just Transition Fund, and other funds. And bottom up, which is probably the area which we will talk later in this dialogue, should reflect the regional priorities stemming from local communities, cities, stakeholders, civic society, and the initiative of persons and their change of behavior. And out of this bottom line would result the proposal for sustainable investment projects, which could enter at the national level to the, let's say, country strategic on the Green Deal. The Green Deal has a number of policy areas. There are 12 of them. And if I mention them, it means that they will also reflect the Czech effort to cover them, but also on the Bavarian side to find out the intersection and priorities at these policy areas where we can start to think about the cooperation. So that's a climate change, it's energy, it's industry, buildings, transport and mobility, agribusiness and food, ecosystems, biodiversity, forests, water, air and soil. And I think in all these areas, and that's my second area of remarks, this is involvement of the Czech Republic. Because the Green Deal is about the principle of sustainability, let me just remind that the Czech Republic has an institution which is Governmental Council for Sustainable Development as the body at the governmental level, which deals with broad aspects of sustainability. The chair of the Governmental Council was the Prime Minister, currently is the Minister of Environment. We have steering committee, broad stakeholders participation, a number of committees which deal with aspects of sustainability like energy, climate, like nature, etc. It's worth mentioning that in the score of Sustainable Development Goals, Czech Republic is on the place 7 according to the OECD scoring principles. With the view of the Green Deal, the Czech Republic has been addressing and actively deals with all policy areas I mentioned and goals, but also to different extent of achievable outcomes. And we will maybe pass about how successful are we, or where are our priorities, and also where are the areas of possible cooperation with Bavaria. The financial mechanisms of EU is the great opportunity for the Czech Republic to embark on the transition and changes which are needed in many areas. So on the modernization fund, we established the institutional arrangement at the Ministry of Environment, and the operational unit is the State Environmental Fund, which will be responsible to operate the whole flow of modernization fund. The same is true for the Just Transition Fund. So currently, we are consolidating the institutional preparedness of the Czech Republic. We are having discussions about their priorities. This is the bottom-up approach I mentioned initially. And we are just exploring the intentions of different groups and stakeholders about the programs. The first call for project proposal will start January 21. So we are running against time, but our interest is really to define effective and high quality project which will support this transition. This conference
Mr.
is
Kalash,
about
can you please finish in 1 minute?
Communities. Or,
can you please finish in 1
yes,
minute?
okay. One of the points is the resilience of our communities. And I'd like to stress that we understand the resilience as a cross-cutting factor for 3 sustainable pillars. It goes as a new area which emerged after the COVID and made us aware how important the resilience is. And we can talk afterwards about our measures, the resilience at the community level. We have some examples. And finally, I just want to mention that we will have potential areas of Bavarian, German cooperation and Czech cooperation in many areas which would be related to the Green Deal. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalash. This was very helpful, and I think also providing a very comprehensive insight into the institutional setup, including the funding mechanisms that are in preparation for the Czech Republic, and that we will be, of course, trying to make the best use of in order to meet the climate targets and fulfill the Green Deal agenda. I would like to hand over to Mr. Horsch, who is actually having a bit of a different background, being a very successful entrepreneur and businessman, and having a very practical collaboration, as I believe, from Germany or Bavaria to the Czech Republic, also running several farms in the Czech Republic, in fact. So what is your take on the current state of the Green Deal agenda with a view of the Bavarian and Czech relations? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the short introduction. Yes, well, I'm very pleased to be on a panel like this, especially with Czech personalities. Even though we work a lot with Czech Republic, we have not yet got a lot of contact with people like you. Quickly, maybe to introduce me a little bit more, I'm basically a farmer, as you already heard. About 40 years ago, I started with the help of my family a farm machinery business where I started to build modern tillage and seeding equipment because we did not believe in the technology of having to plow the soil and disrupt Mother Nature by turning the soil over and killing microorganisms and so on. And we didn't believe in this, and so we tried to introduce a no-till, min-till system first on our own farms, and then I learned as a young farmer, maybe there's a way to start a business and build machinery for other farms. And so this is what I did, apart from farming. Today we are probably number 3 in the world in seeding and tillage. So we are probably one of the largest seeding and tillage suppliers in the world. By actually not trying to basically interrupt the seeding and tillage market or get into the seeding and tillage market, by basically thinking about what do we do to soil, how can we improve soil and cut costs in machinery and in fertilizers and chemicals if possible, to maintain the same yields or higher yields by maybe using more Mother Nature's help. So that's quite interesting how far we have gotten. Now we're learning with all these climate issues and green deals and so on, that we have to take our business one step further. One step further means that we think crop farming, I'm specialized in crop farming, so I have not much to do with animal production and so on. It's mainly grain production. That's where we're highly specialized and where we work in, not only in Czech Republic, we work all over the world. We are learning today that we can actually build on our experience of 40 years of improving farming practices by improving them further in terms of reducing chemicals and fertilizers on one side, and on the other side, improving soil structure by building carbon into the soil. That means by increasing the humus content in the soil, which means that we actually can capture carbon dioxide, extra carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and store it in form of a certain type of carbon in the soil, which is one part of humus. This way of farming is called regenerative farming. It's a movement worldwide where we are just one little part of it, and we in our business, both as farmers and as machinery manufacturers, take that very seriously, because we think that could be one big contribution to this Green Deal that's been talked about and negotiated in terms of really making a significant change in our climate in terms of capturing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. By the way, as you also heard, we have 3 farms in Czech Republic, and one of the farms is a model farm which is near Madla Boleslav. And about 2 years ago, we made contact with Skoda in Madla Boleslav, and we were talking with Skoda about the possibility of trying to change cropping systems, not only in Czech Republic, also worldwide, and basically helping them to sequester carbon. And by doing that, by starting this discussion, we've gotten quite a bit with them now with Corona and the change of the CEO of Meyer, which was changed to a new person, which we don't know yet what happens within Skoda so far. We've gotten to a point where they got really interested in this thinking about sequestering carbon, where they cannot become more carbon neutral by saving energy and using different energies and whatsoever. They always have a certain amount of carbon dioxide in there, which is created by their production process and of the cars, which they cannot replace. So they look for sequestering, they look for replacement, they look for carbon credits. And one could be farming, different ways of farming, which enables us, and just to give you some numbers, we are thinking today that with regenerative methods of crop farming, growing grains mainly, it is possible, it could be possible, let's put it this way, it could be possible to sequester between 5 to 10 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent each year in our soils in Czech Republic or Germany or most of the rest of the world of crop farms. Which could be quite significant, because you take like only Czech Republic, which has 3.2 million hectares of cropland, and you multiply this by 5 or theoretically by 10, this could be a huge impact that only farmers could have in sequestering carbon. And on the other side, the Skoda people are telling us, they say, well, we're looking for planting trees somewhere in the Himalaya or the deserts and whatsoever. I mean, first of all, this is outside of Czech Republic and outside of Europe. And secondly, it is not really makes sense, because a tree normally lives 300 years and then it dies and then it decomposes again, and the carbon dioxide which we stored in the tree goes back into the atmosphere. So farming could have there a quite different, more sustainable way of sequestering carbon. So anyway, just to give you a little bit insight of what we do. And what we also try to do in Czech Republic, not only as farmers, also in working, for instance, with Skoda right now, in developing hopefully a successful way for them to help them to sequester carbon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michal, for being so concrete and specific about sharing the intelligence and know-how that your company has been able to acquire. And really, I mean, this debate about companies planting trees has been quite prominent here in the Czech Republic, but many of us have doubts about whether this is really the ultimate way to go, or whether there are some more efficient methods to do on the site. So I think this is an inspiration to many of us, and we might still get some questions to your suggestions later on. But now let me hand over still to Anna Karníková from Hnutí Duha Friends of the Earth Czech Republic, who herself has had a lot of experience in working in the public space as well, but now she's a representative of an NGO, and she might give us some alternative angle of the Czech climate policy as it stands at this point. So Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the possibility to talk to all of you. And first of all, congratulations to Mr. Horsch, because this is an amazing thing that you've managed to actually build a successful business of the future. So I'm deeply impressed by this. I'm glad I could hear about it. And as an NGO representative, I'll allow myself to be a little brutal about the reality of climate policy in the Czech Republic. I hope you won't mind, and I'm happy to discuss my proposals later. And the stark difference between Bavaria and Czechia is quite visible, and especially when I now hear that Bavaria has already embraced the opportunities stemming from the increase of the emission target for 2030 to at least 55%. So we already there see quite a big difference. So I would like to directly answer the introductory question of the panel. And I would say that Czechia is actually neither willing nor ready to fully embrace the massive change that the climate change requires of us. Maybe just to remind you that Czech government opposed the plan, the EU plan to reach climate neutrality by 2050, and it will very probably do the same in the struggle to increase the 2030 target to at least 55%. And I need to say that without a proper discussion about scenarios whether we are actually able to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, we have no such national scenarios from the government, and the ones that we have presented by were mostly prepared by the NGOs in cooperation with academic institutions, and they're showing that there is a way, but there's a way when there's a will. So this unwillingness has quite practical implications. For example, at the moment, we're quite far from using the full potential of energy efficiency measures or renewable energy sources. And so actually this lukewarm approach becomes some sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you don't choose the path of change and you work on it, it will always seem impossible. And I think this is the state that we are in currently in the Czech debate. So you might be asking the question, why is this? Why is Czechia not willing to embrace a change? And I would like to offer you two possible explanations. And this is the questions that we are really trying to wrap our head around in the climate movement, because we believe if we find out what the answer to this question is, we would maybe be able to change what Czech Republic thinks about the climate goals. So one of the reasons, and it was already mentioned by Professor Schroers, I believe, is that indeed Czech Republic has relatively higher costs of energy transition, being one of the main transitions that needs to be done. And this is because of the structure. We have a lot of emission-intensive industry. We also have mining regions that have been impacted by coal mining quite importantly. But so we might be tempted, and this has been really quite obvious in the Czech debate about decarbonization, that it's a matter of money. But as Mr. Kalash mentioned, the money is there. We have a lot of funds available at the moment. We have the Just Transition Fund, we have the Modernization Fund, we have the Next Generation EU Recovery Fund. So in the NGO sector, we actually think that at the moment there's so much money available that it makes us wonder whether we will have the capacity to use it meaningfully. So I wouldn't say that it's a question of money, but still I would like to point out one specific about the Czech debate. And we always talk about costs and we never talk about the benefits. And we also always talk about risks and we never talk about opportunities. So this is a very special feature of the Czech debate. And maybe to touch upon another topic that has been brought up in here by Professor Schrois, I believe that what is specific about the Czech debate is very much that the specifics of Czech debate is very much down to the mentality and experience of a certain generation of decision makers who are currently dominating Czech politics. In their view, nuclear power is the only viable answer to the conundrum of energy transition. That's the only possible solution. And as they see this as the only possible solution, they are ready to invest vast amounts of political capital, administrative capacities, and economic sources into it, which, however, means that these sources are lacking elsewhere. We know that another nuclear power plant, which there is a plan to build and put into operation in 2040, will not help us with the need to phase out coal, which we need to phase out at around the year 2030 already. And we know that by focusing solely on nuclear power, we are missing out on massive opportunities in sectors such as renewable energy, energy efficiency, or circular economy. So this is just a bit of the NGO's view on the current situation. And maybe to address the question of cooperation between Bavaria and Czechia, I believe there are plenty of opportunities, but to mention just two of them. The first one is a topic that doesn't appear very often in the debates about climate neutrality and decarbonization, and that's the question of carbon sinks. It has been addressed here already, but I think this is a very topical thing for cooperation between Bavaria and Czech Republic. We are namely facing the same problem at the moment. And that is not just the problem with our agriculture and the way we treat our soil, but it's also the massive bark beetle infestation, which in our country has caused that we will lose all spruce monocultures in lower altitudes in about 5 to 7 years. So this is, of course, a bad thing. We all love our forests, but it also has a huge impact on our carbon budget, because it means that in the Czech Republic, the forests have already lost their sink function and they actually turned into sources of carbon emissions. So this is a big change that we will need to address in the years to come. And I believe that Bavaria has experience to share on this issue. And final thing that I would mention is renewable energy. Bavaria has currently 5 times higher production of energy from wind. And as you can imagine, in terms of climate conditions or area of land for disposition, we have about the same size. So I just want to say that it's clear that it's much more a matter of politics and policy than of the weather. And what is quite interesting, and we've been actually highlighting some of the Bavarian experience, is that Bavaria has quite a lot of examples of community-owned renewables. And for example, I can mention the city of Ursenzollern or the region of Bamberg. We, of course, know that large installations of renewable sources are necessary to achieve climate neutrality, but community-owned renewable sources are a very important enabler because they are showing the feasibility of renewable energy sources to the wider public, and they are also showing a clear benefits to the communities. And I know that in Czechia, the regulatory failure of the 2010s regulatory failure regarding the renewable energy sources have actually casted quite a long shadow on renewables, but I believe there is a way with community-owned renewables to rehabilitate the reputation of renewables in the Czech Republic.
Thank you, Anna. You've managed to provide a lot of inputs into quite a short time, so that is very impressive, both commenting on the Czech policies, but also bringing up very concrete projects. I'll have 2 follow-up questions on you panelists and then open it to our audience. One is a general question, and let me be a little bit stingy here, but both Ms. Schroers and Mr. Kalash, of course, indicated that the Green New Deal is the new growth agenda, and that is how it's been framed by the European Commission, basically indicating that we can have both the necessary emission reductions that we expect to be actually increased, the target from 40 to 55% into 2030 compared with 1990, and we can at the same time have economic growth. However, I mean, can we really do that, and what would be necessary for this qualitative change? Because if we look at historical data, we do not have much indication about this sort of a very fast decoupling taking place. So systemically, what do you think are the fundamentals of such a systemic transformation that will be necessary? And if I may, I would address it to Ms. Schroers initially.
Yeah, thanks for a really important question. I think the first thing to say is I often hear in Europe, Europe is going it alone, and this is going to be too expensive, and it's going to be detrimental to the European economy. My response to that always is, if Europe thinks it's going alone, Europe is sleeping. Because in fact, many other parts of the world right now are embarking on similar green transitions. Perhaps you noticed in the news just yesterday that California announced it wants to eliminate gasoline-powered cars by 2035. Of course, that's a response to the forest fires. And in the United Nations, China announced it plans climate neutrality by 2060. Of course, that's later than the European target of 2050, but China is much larger, and China has a much more ambitious project when you think about the size of its population and its very heavy coal reliance. So what we're seeing here is a transition that is starting to really take off globally. So if Europe isn't on board, Europe will lose. I think Europe has a very, very important reason for pursuing the green transition beyond the environment. I'm an environmental professor, so that of course is my main concern. But I think there's a very good economic reason to make the transition, because if Europe doesn't, Europe will lose. Other countries are pursuing new technologies for transportation, new technologies for energy, new technologies for agriculture. In field after field, we're starting to see real competition emerging here. I think Europe can say it played a big role in helping this process along. Europe has pushed hard internationally for the last decades, and we know that there's countries like the United States with a president who hasn't accepted that climate change is a problem, that's causing some slowdown in transition, but the trend is here, and I think quite clear. But what we don't know, and this is what makes it challenging, is where and how to make this transition a successful transition for Europe. And here I think Europe really needs to have more confidence in itself, because Europe is highly educated. The potential for change is very much wanted and seen by the young generation. And we know that every next generation wants to do things differently than the previous generation. So I like to work with young people and say, okay, let's imagine we're moving into a world of greater urbanization. Let's imagine the city of 2040 or 2050. What do we want it to look like? And maybe that city will no longer be heavily dominated by concrete, roads, buildings, etc. But maybe that city will be focused much more on green space and green buildings and passive buildings. Exciting for the architects, exciting for the engineers. Let's think about transport. Cars sit around in cities unmoved most of the time. We're seeing more and more cities that are moving to new forms of transport, focus more heavily on public transportation, more heavily on bicycles, electric bicycles as well. Lots of potential for change here. Renewable energy. I was just looking as you were talking. Germany had 3% of its electricity from renewables in 1990. Today, it has 53%. So 1990 until 2020, yes, that is 30 years of time, but big changes. So I think there's a lot of potential here for thinking about how we can develop new economic potentials. And what I do really hope we can still have in our discussion is to think about how especially the young generation in Bavaria and in the Czech Republic can work together in developing some of those ideas.
Thank you very much for being very concrete and providing some specific ideas to hold on to. I would still like to ask Mr. Kalash if he has some ideas and thoughts for particular projects for cross-border cooperation between Bavaria and the Czech Republic within the European Green Deal agenda that he think might be interesting to explore or implement in the upcoming years.
Yes, may I just add one remark to Mrs. Schleus on the decoupling? We are talking a decoupling between the GDP growth and energy emissions, but we should add also material, which stresses the area of circular economy. I think they are the strategic goals of European Union to reduce the material import dependence, not only energy but material. And I think that's a big issue in our country to introduce very circular economy in the Czech economy. So that's a remark on this. On the potential area between Bavaria and Czech. Generally, to start any cooperation, we need to have established contacts. And I must declare that there are already established contacts at official levels, at regional levels, at levels of industry. So I think we are well interconnected, and so we can communicate well. And I think this is the first prerequisite to think about areas where the cooperation would be useful for both parts. One of the approach to find out the priority areas in Bavaria and Czech Republic are the priority within the sustainable or regional sustainable investment programs and investments. And we know that Bavaria put a lot of effort on clean transportation, on clean energy for transportation, on electromobility. And what I like very much from Mr. Horsch to hear, the soil economy, I would say, which is the enrichment of soil. And this is the great area also for the Czech Republic. But there are other areas which are particularly already on the way or could be reinforced, extended. One of them is the digital area. And there is a memorandum between the Czech Republic and Bavaria on 5G communication corridor. For environment, it brings us the digital possibility to, let's say, visualize our forestry damages on Bavarian or Czech side to establish through monitoring faster actions. Bavaria has in mind, for instance, combined fuel stations, so mix of traditional photovoltaic batteries, hydrogen, biogas. There is a project on the Bavarian side, a cross charge point financed by Horizon program. And I think there is a possibility for Czech cooperation. The Technical University in Deggendorf coordinates this project on the Bavarian side. I'd like to mention the interesting projects which we implemented with Bavaria 2 years ago on electromobility, to promote electromobility in the Šumava and Bavarian regions, particularly on our side. Electromobile rally from Munich via Prague to Ostrava. Another area which I have in mind is, for instance, the mentioned circular economy. Bavaria is advanced in know-how in utilization of local energy, of local waste. So this is the exchange, the platform for exchange of these experiences. One of the ongoing projects in this area is the Bavarian know-how on how we can resolve the sludge issue in the water waste, water cleaning projects. And pilot project based on this cooperation will start in the city of Písek later this year, and we expect that we can deal with these sledges in the large scale, because we have maybe 25 cities like Písek in the Czech Republic. So this kind of transfer of know-how already ongoing is very, very helpful to the Czech Republic. Another area which I think is on the way is the dialogue of using the ashes from the Czech power plants, and Bavaria has experience in this, in certification of the low emission materials in this area. So we are very much interested in sharing this experience and get the certification on this as well. One area which could be related to national parks on both sides is the sustainable tourism. Bavaria is quite advanced in this, and it would be helpful having some kind of common concept on this sustainable tourism. We could cooperate on the autonomous buses, which would connect both parks on both sides. So I think there is a number of areas which will go through the agenda of Green Deal on both sides at regional level. And by the way, there is a high-level interregional dialogue between the region of Pilsen and Budweis with the region of Bavaria in Munich. So around this dialogue, another idea of cooperation could emerge.
Thank you, Mr. Kalash, for listing out really a set of areas and the specific thematic projects that could be implemented in the upcoming years, and giving us a bit of a gist of what potential really lies there for the cross-border cooperation, and that it is, of course, to a large degree already tapped and being explored. So we're not at point zero, but we're actually already starting from something that has been quite developed. Now let me open the debate to the audience as well. I would ask everybody who would like to ask a question to one of our panelists to write hand in the chat and then address the question to the panelists specifically. But first, as a priority, I promised to give the opportunity to the young professionals within the Czech-German program. So I don't know if my colleagues Michal and Václav are with us in the room. I would assume so. But hello, Michal. Do you have somebody there who would like to ask a question to one of our panelists? And I think we could take two at the same time. Maybe in the meantime, before they resolve it, I just invite everybody else. Okay, so for the time being, there's no questions, Michal indicates. Would anybody else here at the GoToMeeting like to ask a question or even give a remark? If not at this point, and I'm saying again, you can just write hand in the chat box and I will try to pick this up. Let me come back to the question of forestry and sustainable forest management, because I thought this came up prominently, and it's a big issue on both sides of the border, I believe. But maybe, I don't know if Mr. Horsch is fully expert in this topic because he's more in agriculture, but a summary of how the situation has been developing in Bavaria would be very helpful, because of course we can imagine that Bavaria is a bit further down the road when it comes to the bark beetle calamity, etc., and dealing with this situation. But at the same time, we all know that the recovery and sustainable forestry is a way for decades and maybe even millennia. So my question would be, what do you think can we say from this sort of a time that we have had since the calamity has hit the Bavarian forests, and what are the lessons learned that we can make from that? And then, of course, I would like to also hear from Anna, whose organization has worked on this topic prominently. What does she think are the lessons that we should be taking away from the situation in Šumava?
Well, as you already mentioned, my background is crop farming and not so much the forest side, but I'm also involved in the forest side to an extent. Well, first of all, I mean, where there is forest, there cannot be more forest. So let's take this as a principle. The only way to improve forest as a carbon sink is basically make him keep it growing and not let it dying. And obviously, when you go back about 20-30 years ago, we had the acid rains which killed the forests. We've well, actually after 1990, when we closed down one of the most polluted power plants in the east, it looked like that we and in Europe, in Western Europe, we also stopped also this acid rain producing power plants and whatsoever. We got around this problem that we didn't kill the forest anymore, but now we had to have the what you call the Borkenkäfer, the bark beetle. Seems to be one of the biggest problems of anything that kills forests here in Central Europe and also in Czech Republic, as you can see. This seems to be a really sad thing happening, because it looks like that there's not a fix, even a chemical fix is not there, which would not be very nice even if it would work. And it looks like that we have some real serious issues here. And on the other side, when I talk to the Skoda people, they are now replacing their power plants, going away from coal and gas to wood chip, which mainly comes from forests that had to be cut down just because of bark beetle damage. You know, so they just a number. The Skoda people are now, only for the 3 plants in Czech Republic, they are just using, I think they're starting this year, 750,000 tons of wood chips coming from Czechoslovakian forests. But the lucky thing is for them is that the bark beetle is killing so many trees, so they have to cut an excessive amount of trees out of the forest. So I'm sure that there's a lot of attempts out there. I mean, some of my friends, farmer friends, which are also forests, I mean, what they do is mainly they take out the Fichten, birch trees, I think, in English, and replace it by other trees. At least they would not be as much affected by the bark beetle, but that will take time till they become big again and start sequestering an excessive amount of carbon out of the atmosphere, or carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So yes, the forest is an issue, and but it's more an issue in Europe to make sure that we protect it and keep it growing rather than letting it die. But to increase the amount of forest, I think, is a stupid thing. It's just an illusion. You can only increase forest there where there is land that has no trees on and is not used for arable for growing crops or growing food on, which is not necessarily you find that in Europe. You find very little wasteland in Czech Republic. You find very little wasteland in Bavaria. So it is kind of a public catching idea, but it's not really. And I see it in our farms in Czech Republic, where they now start to plant trees along the roadside and whatsoever. And I think it's more a joke then it really does make a fundamental change. So we should be really careful what's happening there. And we have similar things happening in Bavaria, you know, where things is becoming more because it's nice for the public, it's nice to talk about, to plant a few trees, but it really will not have much of an effect.
Thank you, Mr. Horsch, and for being also quite blunt about this topic. Now, I will first give the floor to Mr. Dorner from Technische Hochschule Deggendorf, who might have something to add on this topic, then still give Anna a chance to comment, and then we go back to our young professionals in the room. So Mr. Dorner, you have the floor, please.
Well, thank you very much. We worked on this issue of the bark beetle in this Bavarian forest, Šumava region, together with the Czech Academy of Science. And I think the question about forest is not about increasing the capacity to take CO2, but sustaining the current capacities that are in the forest. And at the moment, bark beetle is not the illness, it's the symptom. What we see on the one hand side of forestry mismanagement of the past, but second and even more of the causes of climate change. And I think that forest in this case can be an important showcase, because we talked about the issue of GDP and how to sustain growth on the one hand side, but get green on the other hand side. And the Stern report showed quite well that there will be costs of adaptation to climate change. And especially in our industrialized countries, the costs will be enormous. So if we take this case of the forestry and forest management, then I think it will be essential to organize the conversion of forests from needle trees to a mixed forest structure, especially in the commercial forests, and take these investments serious and make a great opportunity out of it. On the one hand side, to sustain the capacity for CO2, and on the other hand side, to use it for the economic effects that forests, the most parts of forest have for us. Sorry, a little health issue. So I think
thank you, Mr. Dorner.
The big opportunity for the Green Deal.
Thank you for bringing this up, and I think that Anna would be happy to complement this forest debate.
Not that much to add, really. Mr. Dorner has, I think, given you all the important information, but the thing is, it's not about the current forests, but as we're losing all the spruce monocultures, which was one of the most common type of forests in the Czech Republic, we are actually discussing how to have forests in the future that will be more resilient towards the problem of climate change. So this is about really creating new forests, new and more resilient forests. And actually the recipe is exactly as Mr. Dorner said, to have a mixed forest of less needle trees, and also to have a forest which is diverse also in terms of age of the trees. So we actually were lobbying on this quite a lot in the last 2 years, and we achieved some changes. One of them, just to mention how a little thing can do a big, can have a big impact, is, for example, currently the owners of the forest were actually required by the law to start reforesting very soon after they've lost the forest, which, however, creates, again, vulnerable forests. So we have actually extended the time for the owners to leave it up to the forest to revitalize itself. And we believe with this, we are actually going to have a forest much more resilient for the future.
Thank you very much. So in the meantime, we have had a couple of questions popping up. So let me first pass the floor to the CGYPP before we get to others. You can speak up. But we don't hear you, unfortunately. I think there might be a technical problem. We don't hear anything, really. No, sorry. I think you have to resolve the technical issue. And in the meantime, let me just pass it on. You can also put it in writing, but I think you can resolve this problem. In the meantime, I would like to give the opportunity to Hannes Lachman to ask a question to the two ladies on the panel. Mr. Lachman, you have the floor. Still nothing really. Hopefully others have more luck with the technical issues around here. I think it should be
okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please. You can speak now.
All right. Okay, I hope you can hear me now. Thanks to all the panelists and to Mr. Jungwirth for the very nice and interesting discussion so far, also on behalf of the Bavarian representation. It's good to see that there seems to be a lot of common ground between Bavaria and the Czech Republic within this large project of the Green Deal. However, I would also like to draw your attention to the current situation, which I think is part of this topic, today's topic after all, because I observe some political decision makers in Europe now stressing the idea that Corona is still not the only huge challenge, and we still must keep in mind climate change and work on it. And I think much of what you said would support that view. But there's also the other political opinion that says that we need to use most of the available public resources, money, human resources now to solve the Corona current crisis before we can talk about climate change. And I would be interested in what your reply would be to this view. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and thanks for bringing up the issue of Corona that we have so far omitted more or less, but of course it still comes to the question very much. So I think this was addressed to Ms. Scheuers and Ms. Karnikova. So Ms. Scheuers, if you can take it out from here, please.
Yeah, thanks for the question. You are, of course, right that one of the things we're also seeing is a certain amount of, there's a certain amount of populism, but there's also something behind that, which is people who are worried about their futures. They're worried about a changing world. And of course, the Corona plays into this whole process. But I think what we need to learn from the Corona pandemic is that this is what could be our future if we don't pay more attention to climate change. I've been in many different international discussions in the last days, and what I hear from more and more speakers is that while the coronavirus is terrible and the economic impacts are huge, the climate change impacts and the biodiversity loss impacts will be even at a much larger scale if we don't start to act now. And of course, the potential for future pandemics increases with climate change. So I think what's very important here is that we think about the money that we're going to need to invest into the economy for the post-corona recovery should very much be focused on the Green Deal, so that we know we need to invest to stimulate the economy. We know we're going to need public projects. We know that we're going to need to help regions and towns that have been heavily hit by the coronavirus. But we need to use the investments that we have in a different way than we've done in the past. So we really need to be investing into energy efficiency improvements in buildings. We need to be investing into the development of resource efficiency that saves us costs on resource inputs in the future. We need to be investing into the digital economy that can help us to really find ways to become much more energy efficient. So I think your question's really important. I think it focuses our attention on how can we link post-corona economic recovery to the Green Deal. And I think we have to be very careful not to go down the path of investing again in what you can, for simple reasons, call the brown economy, because otherwise we need to find double investment or even triple investment, because we'll need to clean up the problems we're creating if we invest wrong.
Thank you. Anna, would you like to follow up?
Maybe two things. One of them is why we are currently having such a huge problems with changing the course of our economy is that we have invested heavily in brown infrastructure, that we have invested in emission-intensive industries and so on, we create a massive carbon lock-in that is really hard to overcome. So I think this concept of carbon lock-in explains it really well, why we simply can't afford to do any other than green investment as a means of investing in the recovery. So to me, this is very much about this, and we just can't really afford any more trouble with carbon lock-in. And maybe second thing that I would like to address, that's one aspect that I don't see that much in the European Green Deal. I understand the reasons. Maybe this is about what is the distribution of competences between the EU member states and the EU institutions, but it's the social aspects of the recovery. And we know, and we've been having this problem for a longer time, that there is a huge inequality across Europe, and we haven't been able to tackle this, at least in the Czech Republic. The inequalities are getting worse, and we see this social polarization as a huge obstacle to any green transition. So it's not just the corona, it's also the long-term social problems that we need to address with the post-coronavirus recovery. So what we're focusing on in Friends of the Earth Czech Republic is how to make all these recovery packages work also for the most vulnerable ones who haven't really benefited from the very long period of economic growth.
Great of you to bring up the social aspect as well, which of course, as we know, is fundamental to make the agenda acceptable across social strata. Let me now give the floor back to the CGYPP room, and hopefully Martin will now get his chance to ask the question.
Hello, thank you for the second attempt. Is it better now? Yeah, perfect. My name is Martin Mark. I'm from the Czech-German Chamber of Commerce, and I have one quick question. The Green Deal is quite a big deal of the European Union that can or could inspire also other countries and other regions outside of the European Union. And my question is to the panelists, if they already have seen some marks of inspiration, if they already have seen other countries reacted to it and some probably presented some other goals and targets like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Do we have anybody else in the room who would still like to ask their question? If not, for the time being, I open the floor to any of our panelists to pick this question. We have already mentioned China currently declaring pathway to climate neutrality 2060. What other inspirations do we have there? And are there any green deals out there with the exception of the European one?
I'd be happy to talk if that's okay. I think there's a lot going on right now. We mentioned briefly China, but I think what's interesting to look at in China, China is now surpassed the European Union on all forms of renewable energy capacity development. China's investing heavily in hydrogen fuels, and they've invested a lot in battery technologies associated with new transport technologies. India is investing heavily also in renewable energies, and they're also looking very much these days in what can be done to develop technologies for sections of the population that are not as well off. So how can we develop cheaper versions of the kinds of renewables or efficiency products that we've been talking about in Europe? There's increasing change happening in different parts of North America. Not only California, but the New England states, also Washington and Oregon are investing very much in the idea of transition as well. And depending on what happens in the US election, if Trump wins, then there won't be much change at the federal level, I think, in the US. But if Biden wins, Biden has embraced the idea of a Green Deal as well. And that could, of course, totally change the discussion at the global level, with both China now talking about carbon neutrality for 2060, and if there's a transition in the US administration, then you'll also see a much more engaged United States in the global discussions. And of course, that's good for Europe, because it means that Europe will have more partners to work with for transition. It will also mean there's more competition on the way for Europe, and competition is challenging, but it's also something that pushes us forward. So I would again like to stress that Europe is not alone here. Things are changing really rapidly right now. So I think we really need to be thinking about what we can do in Europe to make sure that we don't fall behind and we stay ahead of the game, because it's more fun to be at the front of the pack.
Thanks for the optimistic framing, even though we know these are huge challenges. I think this is maybe the way to motivate ourselves to stay on track where we need to stay, obviously, to meet our climate goals. We're slowly running out of time, frankly, but still I would like to give the floor to another participant to ask his question. It'd be Przemysław Szewczyk, and please address it to one of our panelists specifically so that we can be concise and still have some closing remarks from all our participants. Przemysław, if you're with us, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you for the words. I hope you can hear me. Okay, great. CGYPP alumnus here, greeting from the city of Ostrava. I have to say this is a really exciting discussion. I'm glad I can be part of it. I work in the automotive industry as a sales guy, and in relation to the Green Deal, a lot of public attention is given to the transformation of the automotive industry towards electromobility. And there are two things that the critics of this, let's say, transformation, or how is it being performed, express. One is that this push is too aggressive and it threatens our prosperity. And the second is that the carbon dioxide outputs with the introduction of electromobility will be only transferred from the exhaust pipes of the cars to the one big exhaust pipe of the plants that will produce the energy that will power the cars. And not so much attention was given, I would say, publicly to these points of criticism. So I would like to know what's your view on that, and I would like to address this question to Mr. Horsch. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Horsch. You have the floor.
Well, first of all, yes, you're right that especially through Corona, now the concerns that a Green Deal could become too expensive and we don't have enough money to get the economy back on track again. That threat is valid. Yes, I can go along with that, but I think we have to find out how long it takes to get through this Corona crisis. But there's enough signs already that the economy may not be as much affected as many people think, first of all. And so on the other side, I still think that Green Deal paper we Europeans have is a great paper. And it's not for the next 5 years, it's for many more years. And yes, we can certainly slow down certain things which are very expensive to do, and we can still continue, like we have discussion panels like this and so on, and look about practical things that can be done actually to make this thing work. But at the end of the day, I would not be too concerned that this is slowing down the economy, as Mrs. Schreier said. At the end of the day, it's a huge potential for business. Look at my business. I mean, my business, I think that Green Deal, it will change a lot of things in farming, but at the end of the day, it drives my business, it drives my R&D team to think about what is farming and crop farming going to look like in the near future, and what can we do to contribute to that. And now we're finding out, the more we look at this is an extra business for us. So extra business means we have extra income. We can employ more people. Farmers make, and at the end of the day, farmers make more money if they can see that potential of changing their cropping systems. And so it's not only in my business; it's in many other businesses. And I think that's the way to drive this Green Deal. The Green Deal is not about a political thing at the end of the day, and that the politicians do it, and then through taxes and through rules and whatsoever. That's the only way to make it work, and investing into it. No, at the end of the day, it takes business like my business and many other businesses that see the potential and come up with ideas and how to make a business out of it. And one more comment I want to make, like you said, also because you come from the car side. As far as I understand, and as far as I studied the car industries, not only with the context with Skoda or through other contexts. By the way, I drive electric car, even an American car, type of Tesla now. Well, I'm not so proud about it, but at least I changed my attitude about cars. You used to drive very big cars before, Porsches and Audis, and now I'm driving an electric car. If you would put me a nice Porsche, a nice Audi, a nice Mercedes in front of my nose after 1 year of experience of electric car, I still would not trade. And I'm learning and get more. And the reason I did it is I want to train myself. What is it like to drive an electric car in reality, and how is it about struggling about where to find electricity and how fast you can go and whatsoever, especially when you're German, you used to drive more than this stupid 100 kilometers or 120 kilometers on the road an hour. But anyway, what I want to make it, what I learned also from Skoda people is the long-term perspective or the mid-term perspective on batteries. On producing batteries and so on, it's not offsetting a combustion engine by electricity, and at the end of the day, the carbon dioxide emission is not really has much effect. I think there's a huge effect because also there's a lot of development work going on, and not only by producing electricity, also by producing the car and by producing the battery, that there will be a lot of saving in carbon dioxide midterm already. But what we talk about, especially the ones who are against the battery, they say, "Oh, it produces far too much carbon dioxide emissions by producing it," and blah 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 blah. I don't believe this anymore. I think the reality is already happening as we see it going down the road. And I think our industry finally gets around it. Even VW gets around it, even though they're a little bit too late on it. That's why we have so much problems in the car industry, not only in Germany, also in Europe, that we've made too much money with combustion engines, and now we're realizing that there's another business opportunity. But I think we're turning around fast, and it's not at the end of the day Tesla that's going to show up, that's going to take the market. I think we have it back pretty soon.
Thank you, Mr. Horsch, and also for bringing up your individual consumer decisions that, of course, might be an inspiration to many, especially if they make enough money at some point in their lives to buy a Tesla or whatever will be then on the market, hopefully a Skoda by then as well. We are actually really out of time at this point, so I would just like to recap what we have managed to cover in these 90 minutes. We have covered both Bavaria, Czech Republic, the EU policy, and of course the rest of the world. Particularly, we have touched upon China and the US, the situation there. In terms of topics, we have went from energy to forestry to agriculture to mobility. And of course, I mean, we both managed to cover the business perspective, the political perspective, and also the technical perspective, as well as the importance of research and education that all this requires for the agenda to be actually implemented. So I think it was quite fascinating to be able to cover such range of topics and angles and expertise. And I particularly want to thank all our panelists for taking the time for participating today. So thank you, Michal Horsch, Miranda Schroers, Petr Kalash, and Anna Karnikova for joining us for this debate. I really hope we can continue it in some way. Of course, I also wish that the CGYPP participants are having a good time both in Prague and online, and will be having a good upcoming couple of days working on sustainability issues. Thanks to all of you who have asked questions. And of course, primarily, this debate wouldn't have been possible without the representation of the Free State of Bavaria in the Czech Republic, co-organized with the Association for International Affairs. So also from my side, thank you very much for taking part in this. And I look forward to continuing this discussion with many of you in the upcoming days and years. Have a good evening and goodbye.